This thing working all right? Chris, is this thing okay in the back there? All right, good. Thank you for coming out for the first of several events in the course of the day today. Hey, Bill. I'm Stephen Corey, the editor of the Georgia Review. I will be introducing Mary Hood to you in a few moments, but before I do that, I'm going to introduce someone else and call him up here. A person who's actually probably ultimately the cause of the events that are happening here this afternoon. Sam Prestridge teaches at the University of North Georgia, Oconee, and he worked a couple of years ago on trying to put together a conference at his school on the work of Mary Hood. For a variety of reasons, that did not pan out, and we got a little bug in our brain at the Georgia Review about how maybe there would be some way that we could pick up and work with Sam and do something here at the University of Georgia. And I had a conversation with Toby Graham, who at that time was only the director of the Hargret Library. Now he's still the director of Hargret and all the other libraries as well. And we had a conversation, and we started to formulate a little bit of a plan. He was interested of some way that we could have some additional event or events beyond the ones that have usually taken place in conjunction with the induction ceremony. But that, of course, we wanted to draw Alfred Urey into it as well. And so that what has transpired is today's reading by Mary and the conversation at 4 o'clock between Mary and Alfred Urey, and then the staged reading this evening of Urey's work. And so I want to acknowledge Dr. Sam Prestridge for being a cause here. And I also wanted him to be a part of the program. And so Sam's going to make a few remarks from the perspective of, I think from the perspective of the literary critic as well as the fan of Mary Hood. And then I will come back up and I will briefly introduce Mary for her reading. Dr. Sam Prestridge.
Thank you. I want to take the occasion to also announce Mary will have a new book coming out from the University of South Carolina Press in February of 2015, and a novella, Seam Busters, will be published as an e-book by the University of South Carolina Press in August of 2015. So that's 3 books and short stories, a published novella, published novel. I have 10 minutes. This is indeed a job for a literary critic. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the Academy and honored guests, contemporary Southern literature has become more than a regional backward glance that gave us the Southern Renaissance, a literature, according to Alan Tate, conscious of the past in the present. I'd argue that such past consciousness is an aspect of any culture and a part of any culture's mythology about that culture. However, mythology, let us agree, in a consumer culture has a shelf life. And in his essay, What is Post-Modernism?, Jean-Francois Lyotard posits that capitalism inherently possesses the power to defamiliarize familiar objects, social roles, and institutions to such a degree that the so-called realistic representations can no longer evoke reality except as nostalgia or mockery, as an occasion for suffering rather than satisfaction. If we consider literature as a part of the mythology that Southern culture has created, we must also, I feel, accept that this mythology, except as nostalgia or mockery, continually needs refreshing. Mary Hood's fiction, I think, is central to that refreshing. And for this reason, I feel that her work is central to the ongoing redefinition and vitality of Southern letters. Hood presents us with characters who are, in essence, between mythologies. The culture they inherit, think they remember, or, as the poet Robert Hass puts it, yearn toward pleasantly, provides no habitation for the soul. Hood's characters look for New Age alternatives, sustain themselves with Babbitt-esque boosterism, insulate themselves with alcohol, drugs, or shopping, that most American of drugs, and look to remnants of the past, familiar habits, or artifacts for anchoring. The considerable power of her fiction is directly related to the betweenness she portrays. In Hood's fictions, the characters live in suspension, and as they grapple to create meaning and relief from their situations, we see the plight of contemporary Southerners. The old mythology cannot be brought with any justice to current conditions. Hood's work captures the fractured landscape of the contemporary South and addresses the lives of men and women making their way and pitching their tents in the hurricane. Hood, however, implies no panacea. Instead, she offers realistic portrayals of people in existential suspension. In this, Hood reflects her allegiance to Chekhovian realism. Her job, as she sees it, is described in a letter Chekhov wrote in 1888. I quote, "The artist is not meant to be judge of his characters and what they say. His only job is to be an impartial witness. Drawing conclusions is up to the jury, that is, the readers. My only job is to be talented, that is, to know how to distinguish important testimony from unimportant, to place my characters in the proper light and speak their language." Hood has often called Chekhov her master, and her fiction vouchsafes the contention. Suggesting Hood's realistic assessment of the contemporary South, however, misses what I feel is one of the most important aspects of her work. In Greek mythology, sufferers and seekers went to Delphi. The oracle's answers, according to legend, were always riddles. The sufferers believed that if they could decipher the riddle, their troubles would be over. Quite often, their situation is resonant with Hood's characters, and this Delphic aspect of Hood's fiction is, to me, its most compelling feature. In all 3 volumes of her stories, in her new novella Seambusters, in her novel Familiar Heat, Hood presents us with characters who cannot rely on past experiences, though the past is all they have to go on. The Delphic inklings they may have are no indication as to whether these characters will make their way or remain stuck in the patterns that perpetuate their quandaries. What do they lack? How does the lack affect their desires? The easy thing is to fall back on reliable, albeit reductive, dichotomies. But Hood's fiction rejects such dichotomies. Certainly, we see sensibilities in confusion as an older, indigenous way of life falls before a suburban or ex-urban expansion. Certainly, the cultural decline of the New South, the erosion of an established culture by consumerism, a critique of American capitalism, an examination of privilege's savage ego, all of these are considered, indicted, played out. However, might not this confrontation more rightly be considered as an expression of the essential worm in consciousness itself, what W.H. Auden called the neural itch? Might not Hood be saying with Faulkner's V.K. Ratliff show, "I ain't cussing you, I'm cussing us all"? Some of Hood's characters live in remembrance of a youthful appearance, a vitality, an achievement, status, or capacity. Some see nothing from the past having any relationship to a present that they mold into their own image. These fill their waiting with hopeful experiments, the Horatio Alger myth, New Age practices, or homeopathic remedies, measures James Hillman calls psychologically significant, though inferior religion. These characters imagine a fulfillment contingent upon. Emblematically, it can be as simple as attempting to keep a rare plant alive, buying a hideously inappropriate Valentine, baking pies for a road-worn banjo player, or finding a length of chain from a porch swing. These small things are enactments that posit refreshment, change, a new hope, an expression of their souls. And Hood's fiction is filled with characters who imagine themselves replenished if. Alternatively, many characters are tragic or, on occasion, horrific dead-enders, as an absolute self-absorption ruins any possibility of fulfillment or community, for them or for those around them. The world ain't all me, Floyd from Nobody's Fool wants to remind his daughter Ida. Against Floyd's sage advice, we have Hawk Hawkins growling, either way, my way. We have Jenny with no sense of irony, warning Gid, no future, my terms. We have the narcissistic Moore convincing himself that my problem is that I'm a romantic. Or Candy in Desire Call of the Wild Game Hen saying, my way or no way. How might the Delphic riddle be solved given such absolute hubris? The simple answer is that it can't. And these characters' attempts to control their lives, events, the people around them result in nothing but isolation and strife. As a benediction on all such, I'll recall Creon's closing advice to Oedipus. Don't try to be in charge of everything, he tells the ruined Oedipus. Your life has lost the power you once had. Why do they want what they want? It's the nature of the beast, Hood might say. And our essential search for meaningful expression can be considered a response to what Hood herself has called the Vatic, which she defines as, however, quote, however accidentally or intentionally, a connection of physical life, kinship, to what one, for want of a better reason, a better word, would call spiritual connection. For those of us raised in the evangelical tradition, the metaphor is apt and obvious. For those not raised in that tradition, I'd recommend Stephen Dobbins' assessment of sympathetic affinities, the idea that all things are connected. In a remarkable passage in his book, Best Words, Best Order, he traces the evolution of the idea of sympathetic affinities, what Hood calls the Vatic, from Plato to Mary Oliver. If the idea still seems a bit mystical, Hood restates the matter in terms of the evolution of the brain. Before the human mind became bicameral, she said, when there was no literal truth to be told, when we lived and moved and had our consciousness from and in the right side of the brain, before alphabets wrecked us on quibbling shores, there was knowledge without understanding and understanding without knowledge. Instinct, vision, and there was all of that without judgment. Imagine what it would be like in your own every moment not to have to test the spirits. As a convenience to the Sunday school deficient, that last is an allusion to 1 John chapter 4, verse 1. Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test spirits to see whether they are from God, for many false prophets have gone out into the world. Hood's fiction thus portrays the trials and errors of everyday people testing the spirits. However, I'd argue that these stories are not 21st century versions of the mystery plays, not an endorsement of an orthodoxy or a judgment upon the uninformed or the poorly informed. Hood's characters, I believe, reflect her attempts to create what James Hillman calls a new angiology of words. Our semantic anxiety, he says, has made us forget that words too burn and become flesh as we speak. A new angiology of words is needed so that we may once again have faith in them. Without the inherence of the angel in the word, an angel means originally emissary, message bearer. How can we utter anything but personal opinions, things made up in our subjective minds? How can anything be how can anything of worth and soul be conveyed from one psyche to another, as in a conversation, a letter, or a book, if archetypal significances are not carried in the depths of our words? We need to recall the angel aspect of the word, recognizing words as independent carriers of soul between people. I believe Hood's fiction aims at the establishment of such a new angiology. A terrible word, let's agree, but I think it'll catch on. A new angiology of words. A reestablishment of faith in the capacity of words to become independent carriers of soul between people. Hood's vision, her forthright integrity, aims at nothing less, and her stories are a record of those efforts. Such a life, such a vision, such a work ethic is to be admired and emulated. Such achievement merits her inclusion in the Georgia Writers Hall of Fame. I'm pleased and very privileged to be a part of congratulating her on her achievement and for this recognition. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. I hope all of you noticed as you were coming in a rather extensive setup of books, and I hope you'll stop by and want to get Mary's books afterwards. There are also a couple of published play scripts of Alfred Urey and a number of books by past inductees into the Georgia Writers Hall of Fame. Before you spend all of your money, I hope you will also turn to the other side of the aisle and observe the Georgia Review table, where you will find in particular this issue, our special fall 2012 issue featuring work by and about roughly 30 of the members of the Writers Hall of Fame, including some previously unpublished work out of the past, and a little previously unpublished piece by some former president of the United States. And so I hope you'll want to take a look at this as well. And if you think if there's anybody here who could possibly think that literary magazines are staid or boring, wait till you get to some of the layouts of book covers by our authors. I realize that those of you in the back can't see this as well, but that's just an enticement to you to get out there. When I reported to the office for my first day of work at the Georgia Review on July 19th, 1983, the recently released summer issue was everywhere in evidence, on inventory shelves, on a long table where copies were being readied for mailing, and on the other staff members' desks. The contents of that summer 1983 issue included a short story, Inexorable Progress, by Mary Hood, the third of her works to appear in the review since the arrival of then-editor Stanley W. Lindbergh, who had taken that position in 1977. Our winter 2014 issue, which goes to press in a couple of weeks and will be released in mid-December, includes, and I'm going to stop myself after I read this next sentence and do something I didn't know I was going to do until I got here. The upcoming issue includes Mary's 12th or 13th Georgia Review story, The All and Nothing It Had Come To. And I have in parentheses, I seem to get a different number at different times when I'm counting. Well, I was looking at the display, and I hope you will do that as well, that Skip Hewlett has set up in one of the galleries out there here. And there was a note that Skip had in there mentioning that Mary had published 12 stories in the review, but he didn't know about this one that's coming out. So it is, in fact, her 13th. Mary has told me that no other magazine has featured more than one of her stories. So I hope you will understand why we take special pleasure and pride in the strong association we have had with this remarkable writer. I'm not even going to venture today into discussing her novels. The one published, mentioned by Sam already, Familiar Heat. The one that she has worked on for many, many years. Or the ones she has said are going to be coming along and talks about in an interview that William Walsh conducts with her for a special Mary Hood feature that we did in the spring of 2013. I mention the novels today just to somewhat selfishly lament the additional stories she might have written had she avoided the magnetic draw of the longer form. But also to say how glad I am that the Georgia Review was the magazine that broke an almost 15-year drought in Mary's published stories when we brought out her story Virga in the fall of 2000. We chose Mary Hood stories for inclusion in the all-fiction retrospective issues that we did to honor first our 40th anniversary in 1986, and then our 65th in 2011. And she also made her way into the book that the University of Georgia Press brought out for us in 2012, a book entitled Stories Wanting Only to Be Heard, Short Fiction from 6 Decades of the Georgia Review. Mary's published a smattering of reviews and essays with us as well, and her great perceptivity and imagination shine through in these works just as vividly. Her essay, Breaking It, another part of that special Mary Hood feature in spring 2013, has just been republished in the latest edition of the Pushcart Prize Best of the Small Presses, the most highly regarded anthology of its kind in the country. Mary Hood is one of the 2 or 3 most brilliant people I have had the occasion to meet in my life to date. To say that she is the best short fiction writer in America would be to make an unprovable assertion, so I will not offer those words. But I am prepared to go verbally toe-to-toe with anyone to argue my belief that story by story, decade by decade, no one else can be asserted as her better. Please welcome Mary Hood.
Wow. It's better than a funeral. I wish everybody who knew me could hear you say I'm smart. I tend to do the most amazing dumb things. I recently was to pick my brother up at his mechanics, and my car had been worked on, and I had his, and I went, instead of picking him up to take him to swap cars, I parked at the mechanics for at least 5 minutes beside my own car, sitting in his car, waiting on him to come out of the mechanics. And then I thought, oh, I'm going to have to tell him. So I called him on the cell phone. And he said, where are you? And I said, I'm here. So he looked around because he was waiting for 30 minutes in his driveway on me. And I just said, I have so much on my mind. And he doesn't know I'd done it 3 times before. And I usually just write Post-it notes. And then I put them on the steering wheel. This is the place you're going. I don't know. I'd like to think I was plotting, but if I were a plotter like that, I don't know if I'd ever get through a novel. Anyway, I'm glad to be here, and I'm thanking everyone. Well, kind of like Yogi Berra when he went in the Hall of Fame, he was strangled in a tie and in a suit, and he was standing there, and he said, I want to thank you all for making this necessary. Okay, well, I hope I don't prove anybody wrong with what they've said about me, but I'm sure that, like Dr. Johnson said, in lapidary inscriptions, a man is not upon oath. So I'm hoping that what I'll do is entertain you a little bit, maybe, and this story is eerily connecting to the things that are being said about my processes or my drift. The story is entitled Teacher, and I think I should set it in some sort of frame for you, but I don't know a frame to set it in. There's something I want you to know, and I started to save it to tell you tomorrow, but I think here's where it belongs. No great writer has ever been born in Georgia. Only babies. There's hope. It's the truth. It's the truth. So, with that frame, I'd like to say I'm going to read you a story about a kindergarten teacher. When I was a person just past kindergarten age, I joined the first library I was a member of, and it was called Sweetwater Branch. And I never knew if that was a branch or if it was a branch of the library. It was in Cobb County. It was a small stone cottage with rusty screens and a squeaky screen door. Can you imagine a library with a screen door? No windows, just books. And a small guardian who sat right in the center and greeted and found books for you and put them in your hands. And the way she'd give them was like gifts, like she handed them to you this way, like hot plates, and she'd hand them. When you brought them back, you brought them to her, and she took them, and she weighed them. Was anything extra? Was anything missing? Was there anything bent? Was there anything wrong? And then she looked at you and said, "Did you read it? Did you read every word, Mary?" And I didn't know then there was an option. Of course I read every word. Since then I have some I haven't finished reading. I'll put it that way. But she taught me from the beginning how important words were and that every word counted. And you couldn't quit till the end because you never knew. Which is not entirely why I leave off some things at the end. But it's about this story. I thought I had another page to write. And a child, this is a story about kindergarten, interrupted the flow of the story and the lesson by kneeling up on a chair. And I knew then that was where the story stopped. Life goes on past the end of a story, I hope, in all the stories I write. But the question, which I never thought about that being anything Delphic about questions or riddles, the riddle, that's where you stop. And sometimes it might be I can't bear to think what happens next, or sometimes it might be that they're just, that's it. I don't know how I know, but somehow I always know that's where to stop. And usually I do. In this case, I have one other thing I need to tell you. I wrote the story and I finished. Well, I wrote my part and then the child stopped the story at his point. And then I put it aside. I thought I knew all I needed to know at that point. I'm still learning. I was born a baby too, and I'm still learning how to write. And this story, I knew some things, and there's some Hebrew words in here. And so I knew what the Hebrew words were. The one in particular, I didn't know what it meant. And this is the candelabra with the candles, the lower candles, and the one that's taller that the others are lit from. And that central candle, I may mispronounce this, please help me if I get it wrong, is Shamash, the Shamash candle. Months after I finished this story, I found, doing research because I supplement my income with content writing for textbroker.com, penny and 4 cents, 1.4 cents a word. That's $1.40, 100 words. If you do enough of these in a month, that's gasoline. That's Fritz cheese. It's not inconsiderable, but the research is the most fun. I was on this day writing a simple blog piece that someone else has their name on. I can't claim any copyrights. And the topic I chose from the pool was why do we wear the kippah? Why do we wear the hat? So it's written mostly for young men. In my researches, which went everywhere, including the way you can wear a hat on top and how you, in a New York restaurant, this went on and on. I got so fascinated. I got fascinated between the lines and what the ancient fathers said and on and on. And somewhere in all of that, I discovered that candle, the name for that candle, yes, I knew that. I could spell it. The actual meaning of the word is teacher. The light from which the other candles are lit is teacher. Okay. I don't know where to stick that in the story, so I'll just tell you at the front. But when I found that out, I cried. I thought something was going on here. I didn't know what it was. You may find that out when I read you this story. The teacher. Once, when she had been to the garden center, Cheryl lost her keys. A handful of keys, and she never saw any of them again after driving home and opening the front door with them. Car and door keys and all the others were on the same ring. They simply vanished. She had driven home with them. She had opened the door with them. She went over it and over it. She looked everywhere. She slept badly and had bad dreams. She had another set of car keys, of course. She had duplicates on other rings to all the keys except the bank box. She did not want to go back to the bank and tell them that she had lost both keys within an hour of signing on those voucher cards. It was going to be expensive to drill out those locks, and it would be embarrassing also because the box was empty. She had planned to store genealogy papers, savings bonds, a few silver dollars, childhood gifts from her Uncle John, her great-grandmother's tiny wedding band, a small rock wrapped in a piece of paper that explained simply, "From Mary Mine," a christening gown and cap, a few precious letters from the Civil War, her great-great-great-grandfather's pocket Bible sent back from Camp Chase a week after Appomattox. Her mother had been dead 6 years before her father remarried and moved to Florida. She wanted a safe place, Cheryl did, for the few things her stepmother neither wanted nor honored. Cheryl had chosen a medium-sized lockbox, and within an hour she'd lost both keys. She considered not telling the bank, just paying the box rent for years and years. And when time had passed, replacing both keys wouldn't seem anything but the hazard of long life and many adventures, and not some early clue that she was a loser, that she was going to end an old maid. Not even the tidy kind whose windows and good deeds shine, and whose shoulder pads fit, whose sleeve cuffs are tailored to length, not turned up. Lining showing, causing Mrs. Brown at church to ask, "Can't you sew?" Oh no, how could she be someone who has lost people as well as things? How could she be a person who lost keys? An unstructured orphan, a loser whose house smells of burnt toast and cats, and a kitchen drawer is cluttered with tea balls and wadded recipes and rusty coffee strainers. What if Dan found out? She had just met Dan. She wouldn't tell him, that's all. A woman would be a fool to tell a man everything anyway. She asked Dan's friend with a metal detector to come help her find an earring. Funny how lost and found went together. Even if you don't find what you seek, or what you've lost, you find something else. He found a screen door spring, a bottle cap, and a penny from 1976. Nothing she'd put in a bank vault, even if she found the keys. Within 2 weeks, she decided to tell the bank, pay for the drill out and rekeying, and just get on with life. That would be the healthy thing to do, confess, pay, and get on with it. She did. But something in her had been scarred. Some indelible mark had remained. Years later, after she and Dan were married, she dreamed she saw the lost keys lying on top of a toy cotton bale in Sears. Back to school, the sign announced. And there were her keys, part of the vignette for fall, the little tractor tire fob and its red hub, unfaded by time and misadventure. Cheryl felt such joy and relief in the dream, something unlatching in her. Her heart tried to knock her awake, but it didn't. She slept on. In the dream, her mother found her, and they stood side by side. "May I help you?" her mother said, as though she worked there. "Just looking," Cheryl said. In the dream, she didn't reach for the keys or her mother. She felt that her mother understood how she had suffered, had wondered, in the heat of crisis, if she were losing her mind, and if so, were the keys the cause or just a symptom? After the dream in which her gone mother told her, "There's gone and there's lost," Cheryl noticed that the emotional stress had passed. The missing keys still mattered, but now they were only on her conscience, not on her agenda. The most terrible loss of her life, the most terrible missing thing she never found, was a man. She didn't know him. She had only heard about him, living in a personal care home in Cleveland, Ohio. In the first place, she never had met him. She had only heard of him. Why did this matter? Better said, she had only overheard of him while she was sitting in the recovery and refreshments area at the Red Cross blood drive. She had donated as often as she was allowed once she found out she was blood type O negative and came up negative for human cytomegalovirus. This meant, they had told her, her blood was ideal for premature and distressed newborns. She had a special hero sticker on her card, and they always moved her to the front of the line. She still had to fill out the papers. She still had to answer the forms, the same as anyone else. Have you ever been pregnant was the hardest one. The number changed over time, but live births remained 0. She and Dan did not have children. Yet, she'd say at first. But now she was 40-something. If asked how many children, she'd answer 23 or however many she had in class that year. She was preparing and teaching and caring, not only for the first grade, but for life. Dan sometimes said he was spending the best years of his life in kindergarten. They had planned on the day of the blood drive to meet at the church. It was their anniversary, and donate side by side, her idea. But he was a fireman and got called out. He helped her to let her know. He beeped her to let her know. Sorry. That was the first thing that went wrong. Then they missed the vein in her left arm. The needle went in wrong somehow, and in just a few minutes the blood ceased to flow. The blood already collected had to be discarded. They couldn't just switch arms with the needle. All she gave had gone to waste. They would have to start over with a whole new kit. They were apologetic, but she was determined. "I've got the blood. I've got 2 arms and 2 legs," she said. "I'm here to give, darn it. Do what you have to except cut down." She liked sounding brave and perky, but she meant it too. She imagined some jaundiced prune of a baby plumping and plumbing up, drip by drip, from the pulse of her heart. "There's all kinds of ways of giving life," Dan had told her more than once. He had brought a German shepherd back to life with CPR. For Cheryl, giving blood was not a sublimation or a substitute for anything. It was simply what and all she could do, so she did it. They found a good vein in her other arm and the bags and tubes filled. Soon she too was sitting at the recovery table. It was late in the day. Cookies were strewn and decimated from their first orderly ranks on the plastic tray, and the trash can was nearly full of paper napkins and other debris. End of shift, less than an hour to go. They gave her latex gloves with ice in them to hold on her puncture sites. Both arms were bruised, but not badly. Just stay here 15 minutes, the supervisor said, taping the ice packs into place. Cheryl had to hold still. She leaned forward on her elbows and drank through a straw. She felt fine. This was nothing. This was sort of how it always went, good blood but deep. She wasn't allowed to lift her pocketbook or bags of groceries or anything like that. That's why they made her wait, because she had said she was going shopping after she left. She still meant to, but she would stay and drink 2 cups of juice and eat a few cookies. Some other firemen, a paramedic, a county deputy came to the table after donating, rested a bit, then went back to work. Everybody knew her and Dan. They reported Dan's call was out in the woods, a brush fire, and it was good she hadn't waited on him. The crews were winning, but it was taking time. Behind her at the welcome table, 2 women were signing in to donate. "I've donated before," one of them said, "in Ohio." The other one hadn't and said so in a bright Midwestern accent that carried and bounced off the bare walls of the fellowship hall. "That makes me a virgin, right?" "Try rookie," her friend said. They shrieked with laughter. They were the only ones. Cheryl winced. Indoor voice was not a concept they had ever grasped. She imagined they had not attended kindergarten. Some people didn't. They just pushed and shoved right into first grade. And that was why they did not know how to behave anywhere. The 2 chatted with each other like jays in different trees, filling out their health, sexual, and travel histories on the clipboards. "Gosh," Rookie said, "who knew?" And then, "Oh." Gradually, silence fell, but not for long. During the next step in check-in, sitting privately in the curtained-off cubicle and answering questions orally, having blood pressure checked and a finger stuck to test for anemia, Rookie fell out. There was a clatter of something being pulled down and crashing and a thud. "We're okay, no harm done," the nurse called, and in a minute or so, an orderly helped the dazed woman into a chair at the recovery and refreshment table. "Gimme grape juice," she said, just like that. She ate the last 5 Nutter Butters as fast as she could, scattering crumbs while chatting on a running monologue. Just one of those crazy makers who comment and command, Cheryl thought, and can turn a whole classroom into a sideshow to their own personal circus. Cheryl knew the type, dealt with them in miniature version daily. For Cheryl, giving blood was always a quiet time, almost like communion. To the fireman in uniform, Rookie announced, "I'm a groomer. What do you do?" He's in his uniform. "Not much," he says, finishing his drink and standing. "And a whole lot less now I'm married. But I always leave 'em laughing." He left them laughing. The supervisor came over, checking around. She looked at Cheryl's bruises under those ice bag gloves. "What happened to her?" Rookie said. "Why do you get those?" "No, don't tell me. I don't want to know. I never fainted before, but now I can." 5 more minutes, the nurse decided, looking and putting Cheryl's ice back on. "I'm the one who fainted," Rookie said again. "I need some more juice. You got any cranberry? I always get a bladder infection when I stress." 2 more donors joined them. Again, she announced she had fainted and was waiting on her friend, who was also a dog groomer. One of the gray-haired newcomers needed ice on her arm. Then a soldier did. An attendant fixed them up, handing out "Be nice to me" stickers, glancing past curtains and saying, "What's going on back there? This is my Purple Heart table today." She ejected the last sleeve of Fig Newtons onto the platter. Rookie's pal, the other groomer, joined them at the table. "It wasn't bad," she said. "You anemic?" "We will never know," Rookie said. And that got their merrymaking going again. The gray-haired woman in the bank uniform, khaki trousers, Oxford cloth shirt, badge, asked, "Did you say you groom poodles?" "She does. I'd rather not, but I can. You got one?" Rookie tipped back her cup and emptied it, giving the ice a tap to get it out. No, the teller said. "I was just wondering why they have to look like that." Others at the table laughed, but not the groomers. It's about show style and breed standards, groomer said. They don't have to look like that. Those round things on their... I know, said Rookie. Don't you hate 'em? And the weepy little eyes like suffering old folks? There was a pause. Not you all, she clarified, glancing up at the attendant. You got plenty on the ball, plenty left in the attic, you know, besides which gray poodles don't go gray. They are, you know. So there's that. You're just making it worse, Groomer told her, rolling her eyes at the rest of them. Another pause. You know what I mean, Rookie said. Come on. That old guy our ex-mother-in-law's personal care home in Cleveland. We're serial sisters-in-law. Wife-in-laws? Both of us divorced her son. The other one explained. She sighed. Me first. Age before beauty, Rookie said. Then there's still hope for both of us. Elbow in ribs time, then a high five for a good one, and back to business at hand. He had the same squinty little brown eyes and frizzy hair like a poodle, Rookie said. The gimp, not our ex, the other one explained. Poodles are supposed to be real smart, someone said. Rookie gave a J-like turn of the head, bright eyes unblinking. Continued. Up every morning, tied his handkerchief into knots at the corners and stuffed his Brillo hair up in it, like a shower cap, and wrapped himself in a sheet instead of putting on his robe and beat his head on the wall. Not the poodle, the man, the groomer said. He mumbled. You wouldn't get a word in. Or look him in those damn little eyes, not weeping, seeping, you know, like a poodle. Only you can get bleach and fix a poodle up, some talc, hide those stains. He didn't let anyone near him, not even with food, Rookie's pal explained. Boiled egg and a pack of plain, instant oatmeal. Every day, the bank teller was pushing back her chair, starting to go. She paused. Rookie considered. Every meal, yeah, when I was there. Like I said, he was, well, I don't know what. She glanced around over her shoulder and risked it. Coop doesn't cover it. He was on some kind of trip. His way or no way. The donor groomer said, there was a sign on his door. Knock first, push rolling tray in, leave. Do not touch client while sleeping. Do not wake client by touching, but by voice. Say his name again. And, of course, no fixing windows or, God forbid, touching his stuff. Not that he had any, just pajamas and handkerchiefs. Can you think? Handkerchiefs? When's the last time you laundered one of those? Long-sleeve pajamas, Rookie said. And no stripes. In unison, they repeated, no stripes, and laughed. There it all was, a cranky old black man who didn't want to be reminded of chain gang stereotypes. Ohio was where the slaves thought heaven was. Across the river was freedom. They called the Ohio River Jordan. Cheryl said, surprised she spoke. She did not want to encourage their roadshow, but there it was, tact and fact. Tenets of her teaching could open eyes and hearts. It was never too early or too late. Cheryl kept it simple. Some African Americans cover their hair to work. Habit of a lifetime. They knot the corners of their bandana to make a hat and call it a do-rag. Should she mention chain gang stripes? She mentioned. The groomers looked at her, then at each other, then flexed their brows, laughed, played their trump card. He wasn't black, he was a Swede. Almost in unison, the donor added, or Swiss, something, Spanish, I don't know. Jabber, jabber, jabber. She scowled, pushed her drink cup away from her, shook her head, letting them in on something. Don't try to figure him out. He was where he needed to be. Next stop, a padded room. He could have been a lot easier on all of us, Rookie said. He required. She said that with particular emphasis. Laundry done separately, or did he have a sulking fit? He had this thing about cooties. And we had to wear gloves to bring it to him, anything. Laundry, food, he wasn't sick. It wasn't like he was going to catch anything. It was just all about him. He was crazy. One 4th of July, I was making shorts for summer. No AC, it was an old dump, you know. Fans and breezes, nature's own remedy, and shorts. Everybody wanted them. Just cut off the pajama legs and the bottoms of the long gowns and hem them, you know. Straight stitching. I did his too. He threw them at me. Called me something and then threw them away. He wouldn't wear them. I sewed the sleeves and legs back on and threw them back at him. He wore the pants. Never would wear the shirt. because the sleeves didn't cover his arms. She made wild gestures, as he must have, trying to explain what he wanted, what he would not allow. Jabber, 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 she said again. Her mockery got very few weak laughs. Cheryl's ice bags were off now, and she was ready to go. She picked up her purse to see if she could, and nothing inside her arm snapped or began to bleed, so she thought she must be okay. She rolled the sleeves down over the Band-Aids. She didn't want to go out in the world with needle tracks like some junkie. Maybe he had scars, Cheryl said, drawing on her coat. Yeah, burned and sensitive about the scars, someone else suggested. My brother. You think? Rookie agreed. But that wasn't it. It was his tattoo. What kind of shameful tattoo would an old Swede have invested in some foreign language no one could read anyway? Back at the beginning of the century before this one. Tall ship? Coal-stoking steamer? Had he been a sailor, or maybe it was some tacky pinup doll requiring no translation? Cheryl absolutely hadn't intended to encourage them at all, but she found herself asking. Nothing, Rookie said. Just numbers, the other one added. Perhaps because she had given a bit more blood than usual, Cheryl took longer to figure it out. As she left the hall, she considered. She was envisioning a crest of numbers, something like that, like a wine label, or the burned-in tattoo on a wine cask, or a cattle brand. She was across the highway, already parked at Big Lots, when it hit her and knocked her to her knees. Her purse strap slipped from her shoulder and landed hard. Nothing spilled. She gathered it idly, tranced, working it all out as she walked toward the store. The more she comprehended, the slower she moved. She came to a stop, started back to her car, thought better of it, then changed her mind again and turned back. She had to go. She had to go. She had turned too suddenly and a little dizzy. She could feel her heart beating in her ears. Her long bones felt hollow. She seemed to be wearing lead boots. Despite her excitement, she forced herself to walk deliberately so she would not fall. Even so, it hadn't been but a few minutes, yet both groomers were gone. She didn't see or hear them in the parking lot. Wouldn't she have? They must have parked on the other side of the church near the street. They must have left right after she did. It would have surprised her very much to know that she was about to seek, as she would think of him later, this missing man, the same way she had sought those bank keys, obsessed. She thought all she had to do was ask, then teach, then make a phone call, then go home. End of story. Now her life turned a page. This was a new story. The attendant at the welcome table wouldn't let her pass. She tried to explain quickly, I just gave blood and I need to speak to someone. Is this a medical problem? The greeter stood rolling her chair back with a little wiggle of her haunches. No. Then the trouble began. Cheryl had to explain why she wanted to speak to someone, why she wanted the names of those 2 Ohio women. The Red Cross, she was told again and again, they have a policy. We do not reveal the names of donors. One didn't donate. Give me her name? No, ma'am. Would you give her my name? The clerk stepped back. I'll go ask. When she returned, she said, no. Supervisor says no. Then let me speak with your supervisor. My immediate superior or the director of this unit? Anyone who cares more than you do, Cheryl said. When the supervisor appeared, Cheryl got the same results. Well, could you please give them my name and have them call me? This is urgent. The supervisor stonewalled. Our records are absolute. It's urgent. It may be life or death. The supervisor went to her desk and made a note on a business card, brought it to her. Call the Atlanta Center on Monroe Drive. Here's the direct line. May I use your phone? No, I'm sorry. Besides, she won't be in till Monday. By then, Cheryl had called every listed veterinary clinic, groomer, breeder, house sitter, dog walker in the Atlanta directory. This was before Google. Let's assume she Googled. Metro Yellow Pages yielded to suburban ones another week. The Red Cross, meanwhile, simply said no again and again. It was absolute and it was final even when she explained. Cheryl called the synagogues and the temple. She called the Atlanta Holocaust Museum. She called the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. She phoned directory assistants in Cleveland, Ohio, and she called every synagogue, congregation and personal care home listed. Directory assistants did all they could. She spoke with some good folks all along the way. She called nursing homes. She spoke with Ohio rabbis, Orthodox, Reformed, Conservative, Messianic. Everybody seemed interested in her story, but no one could help. When Cheryl woke in the morning, she imagined the lost man was waking yet one more day, tying the knots in his kerchief, donning it as a kippah, and beginning to thank God. The blood drive had been in March. When the school year ended, Cheryl spent whole days commuting across the state to the university library, searching in archives, phone books, online resources, and newspaper. Without their names or his name, what can we do? They'd all tell her after trying. She prayed in various locations. When the summer break had passed and school began again in August, Dan thought she would ease up, but the quest continued. "When do you give up?" she said. "When do you quit seeking?" But that was a question, not an answer. In October, she got a return call from one of the veterinarians in the suburban metro area. "Did you ever find him?" he asked. Just that. So she knew he wasn't calling with good news. He said, "After we spoke, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I've joined a synagogue and I take my son with me. We observe Yom Kippur." "Oh," she said. "I just wanted to tell you," he said. "If you find him, let me know." Near Thanksgiving, she was on her way along the sidewalk at the strip mall to pick up dry cleaning when she stopped to browse a table of old books. She'd like to buy the old ones with gold lettering and edges, but a paperback caught her eye, something Dan would get a kick out of. A U.S. Army field manual from the Vietnam era, Survival, Evasion, and Escape, $5. She picked it up. That was when she noticed the large weathered green frame, a card tabletop, in the front window of the vintage shop. Sandwiched between the table and its glass top was an embroidered silk shawl. The label said "Fortune Teller's Table, New Orleans, 1950s. Cheryl stood there and stared. The embroidery was in Hebrew. The fringes were blue and white, sun-faded, yellowed, but obviously once blue and white. As she was paying for the book, Cheryl told the clerk, "That's not a gypsy anything. That's a Jewish prayer shawl." "No," the clerk said, checking an index card in the tabletop file. "No." This was not her store. It belonged to her aunt, who was in France. The writing on the card was plain. She showed it to Cheryl. "Gypsy fortune teller, New Orleans. Tabletop only, legs in poor condition, free if they want them. Shelf in back room, price firm." "If it was used by a fortune teller," Cheryl told her, "it's no good now." The frame shawl made her cry. The silk was pressed and puckered behind the cheap glass like something dead in a trap. For the first time in all her looking for the Holocaust survivor in the personal care home in Cleveland, Ohio, she thought, maybe he is dead by now. He, like the shawl, mislabeled and profane due to ignorance, stupidity, and the carnage of waged peace. "I ought to buy it and burn it," Cheryl added, then thought better. No profit given or taken, God forbid, not buy it. You shouldn't sell it, not a penny. Don't take a penny for it. Don't touch a cent from it," she warned her, getting warmed up. The shop girl shrugged, stared, mute. Cheryl left, but she came back. She had to come back. She had to make sure the girl understood. She was a teacher. She'd teach. The girl just looked at her and then away, hard-eyed. "Do you understand? You've been told. Not that ignorance is any excuse." The clerk's fingers ascended the 5 loops in her left ear, turning them with the perfect purple nails on her left hand, each finger with its ring, even the thumb. Then she looked out the window past the fortune teller's tabletop, then glanced back at Cheryl, then past. She sighed, heavily bored. "Why do you hate Jews? That's so World War II. A Messianic rabbi early on had told Cheryl not to worry. She had phoned him and spoken to him very briefly. He had told her and invited her to come to services. She and Dan went. The second time, she went alone. The first time in synagogue had been Simchas Torah. The men danced the aisles, and from that evening, that first evening, she had understood why, the yearning on the far and the final side of the hall where she was, waiting while joy made its way among the worshipers, fringes touching lips and law and lips again, as the bearer and the scroll threaded through the dancers. "Now," the rabbi said the next week when he phoned, "let's talk. He was a good listener. Cheryl had been doing more research. They'll find him, Cheryl had hoped, when she finished explaining, imagining 9 Jews descending on the care home, bringing talit and sudar and a real kippah, and gathering up the survivor, no longer lost in translation, into Minyan, into the garners of the book of life, his name written, his survival in the Gentile wilderness of post-war bureaucracy, Medicare assignment, and loopy Christian rehab, over at last. Rabbi Allen had smiled but wouldn't say. "You'll figure it out," he said. He told her again when she visited him in the hospital that next summer. She wasn't sure how ill he was. She had heard it was serious, or if he would remember her, or if she would be allowed to speak with him. His door was wide open and he called her by name. "I'm still looking," she said. "For what?" "I can't stand it," she said. "He's still missing." "He's not missing a thing," Rabbi Allen told her. She had to say something about that, but she couldn't think. Nobody he matters to knows where he is. An accusation and the thorn, the very thorn in her heart that made her confess, "I'm learning everything I need to know too late." "Not everything," he said, which could swing either way. "Which one of you is still waiting in the dark?" he said. So many things ran through her mind. Not a word came out of her mouth. "Take a chance," he said, but she didn't. "You'll figure it out," he said, shaking his head, smiling, high beam, his blessing. If the rabbi knew a better answer, he took it with him. After Thanksgiving, she received a parcel from his widow. "He wanted you to have this," she wrote. It was a menorah. Cheryl took it to school and set it up for show and tell one day in December. The 2 K-5 classes joined sections for the morning. Miss Brown's students formed in the inner circle on the carpet. Deshawn, Tyler, Kylie, Mary Grace, Emily, Jesus, 2 Justins, Jimmy, Timmy, and Shamika. Rose was absent with chicken pox. Tyrone and Louise had half days, one getting his eyes examined and the other his hearing. So they sat near the door to leave when called for. Cheryl's crew, David, Cal, Angela, Shavard, Omar, Star, Archer, LaQuacia, Leonardo, and Dwayne, Tasha, and Rocky, formed the outer circle in their little chairs. Everyone could see the table. They had all been learning about this all week. She had been reading them the Hanukkah story about the light in the window. Each of them had a plastic dreidel and knew about the game, about the chocolate coins. They would do that later during snacks. The menorah had only 1 candle now, and it was already lit. They add a candle every night, Cheryl said, but they light it from this one each time. Every time. The candle takes its light from this one. Does anyone know what it's called? Leonardo knelt up in his chair to get taller and waved his arm. "My turn," Tanya blurted out. But Leonardo got picked since he raised his hand. "Where does that candle get its light?" he said. Delphic Oracle. Didn't mean to leave a riddle. I've been accused and now I've proved it.